Is Michigan playing the best ball in the Big Ten or maybe in all of college football? We got Justin Rowe on the line from Blue by 90 breaking down Michigan football. Rutgers in the rearview mirror now, and Nebraska coming to town. Justin, how's it going today?
Doing well, doing well. It turns out when Michigan is 9-0, the vibes are high in Ann Arbor. Who would have thought?
9-0 for the first time since 2016, but hoping to close it out a little bit better this time around. You mentioned to me before we started to record that the team's nicked up a little bit in a few areas. And of course, you don't have the final say on this. Nobody knows. It's all speculation, as this is always buttoned up. But in regards to who are those guys that are questionable for the Nebraska game?
Yeah, so Ryan Hayes on the offensive line is questionable. He did not travel to Rutgers. He was a late scratch for that. McCarthy Page at safety as well. He did not travel to Rutgers with an ankle injury, but it sounds like he's getting a little bit better. And then Kalel Mullings too. So Kalel Mullings is a linebacker as well. Mozzie Smith was questionable to go, but ended up making the trip. So that was good for Michigan to have him on the defensive line. And then going back to the offensive line too, Trente Jones, who got banged up a little bit a few weeks back with an ankle sprain. He still was questionable for this game. Didn't end up traveling to Rutgers, but definitely is getting some practice reps, which helps for sure. So I think just about any team in the country in week 10 is going to be a little banged up throughout the year. I think fortunately for Michigan, none of these seem to be super serious injuries. So I think they're hoping to get healthy over the next couple of weeks before that Ohio State game.
Michael Barrett picked off two passes, kind of highlighted the comeback from 3 down to a blowout win by 35. But Will Johnson really caught my eye in regards to being a storyline in this game for a guy that's obviously was the number 1 recruit in the class. A lot expected of him, but still trying to ease him into his role. About 15 snaps per game, but he got his first start and his first pick.
Yeah, well, one guy that I didn't even mention here was Javon Green, who was involved in the Michigan State tunnel altercation and deemed, I believe, had a concussion. I don't think that's quite confirmed, but one thing to come out of all that stuff with Javon not playing as much is Will Johnson coming onto the scene, and so I think that a 5-star is going to 5-star. The kid has some serious talent and enough talent that I know the coaching staff has been trying to get him on the field more and more. And then it seems to be that when he does get on the field, it's hard to take him off. He's made a ton of big plays. So it's been really, really good to see Will get out there. I think it's one thing, too, that helps Michigan. Will's big. He's on the bigger end for a defensive back. And so when there are guys like Keon Coleman from MSU, Will Johnson came in the second half and shut him down. When MSU was just trying to throw deep balls and 50-50 balls to Keon Coleman. So I think, having Will Johnson, they want him to get experience, especially, everyone's looking towards that Ohio State game and that Ohio State wide receiver room. So, having him moving up on the depth chart here and getting more experience, I think is huge in front of that game.
Justin, you calling that a Michigan State tunnel altercation was very kind and politically correct of you.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting. I think that some of the things that are being issued are going to come out this week. I know the team is very much over it. They are like, all right, we got to look forward to everything. I know that's what Coach Harbaugh wants, but there are legal investigations and things going on right now that are going to keep stringing this along. So I hope that from a Michigan guy, I hope that it's not going to be a distraction, but that was, it was definitely something that I felt like both teams ended up feeling slighted because of it, right? The Michigan guys felt like their guys got jumped and that they were going to protect their own, but then the MSU guys on the back end of it thought that things were too harsh at the end, and it was a scuffle turned into a little bit more, but both teams were at fault. So very interesting how it went down. I think the thing for me looking back on it is, that Michigan State rivalry is different. It really is different than that Michigan Ohio State rivalry. It's dirtier. It's more personal. It gets these guys go to school together. They have family and friends that are all fans of one another, and so it's just a different thing just because they're an hour from each other, while Columbus, is still a 3-4 hour ride from here.
Justin Rose here from BlueBy90.com. Before we continue, Justin, best place to find you, obviously, your Twitter handle right there. But in addition to that, what's available for everyone?
Yeah, we've got a lot of good articles going up on BlueBy90.com right now. You can follow us at Twitter. My Twitter's there, but our Twitter is just at BlueBy90. And so we put out podcasts multiple times a week now on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and everywhere you can get those. So we've got a lot of content. This is, Mark, I know this is the best time. This is the home stretch here. We're putting out as much as we can because we know the fans love it. So that's our goal here.
JJ McCarthy, 13 of 27, his worst day passing from a statistical standpoint. There were some drops in there. He came into the game, I believe, as the leading quarterback in the country in completion percentage, but took a hit there. Any concerns about guys dropping passes or misconnections there?
Yeah, I think that, this wide receiver room, we've talked about them being very deep, right, throughout the year. It was, how many weapons does this team have? How do they make space for everybody? And so I think that it's no surprise to anybody to say that passing game hasn't quite lived up to what we would have loved it to be. Now, what I will say to that is I think half or more of that reason is because Michigan's really, really good at running the ball. And Jim Harbaugh loves to run the ball. So I think, what I want to see is I want to see JJ air it out more. I want to see them going back at it because, I think from a perspective of where JJ's at, it's, you can't really get consistent there if you're only throwing that deep ball once a game or less, right? So I think I'd love to see him continue to take those shots. The thing that people want to talk about is like, oh, he hasn't hit well, he's an inch or two too far, and there are some drops where it's, it's just like he's at the back end of the window or the front end of the window. So it's very minute details that JJ has to get going with, to end this stretch. You obviously would love to see them hitting on all cylinders, but, ultimately they score 52 points and doing pretty well there. I think this offense is gonna keep clicking. I think, I have this very strong feeling that there's a lot still left in the playbook as well, that they're going to be unreeling, whether it be in the weeks before Ohio State to make them prep for it or hold them back for the Ohio State game and things that they haven't seen before.
So Blake Corum pretty much just turned in his typical Blake Corum day, 100 yards, a couple touchdowns. But elsewhere, Hendon Hooker ran into the number one defense in the country, and CJ Stroud ran into the wind, I guess. And so it knocked down their Heisman candidacy. I heard a lot of talk this week about comparing Blake Corum and his stats at this juncture of the season to previous Heisman Trophy winning running backs like Derrick Henry and others. And it stacks up pretty favorably. So he's starting to gain a little steam in the Heisman race.
Yeah, I mean, Harbaugh came out and said it himself. He said he should be, looked at as one of the top front runners in the Heisman. So I don't disagree. You go look at what the Heisman running backs have done in the past, and Blake Corum is right on par with every one of those guys that's doing it. So I don't see why Blake Corum shouldn't be in this discussion. Blake Corum is doing things at Michigan that, even with Michigan having really good running backs over the past 5 years, he's still a notch above them. Harbaugh said he's the best running back that he's ever coached. That's saying something because Harbaugh has coached some pretty good running backs both in college and in the NFL. So it's really impressive what he's been able to do. And that's why Jim Harbaugh wants to keep running the ball, because he believes in Blake Corum And I think Blake Corum is going to be one of the guys that leads this team to beating Ohio State and hopefully winning a Big Ten championship and playing for a natty. It's funny. I've been talking a lot with my friends and with other media people about Michigan, and it's like, well, we want to see them throw the ball more. We want to do this, and they'll never be able to beat Ohio State with that. We were saying the exact same thing last year, Mark. Weren't we saying we had the exact same conversation at exactly about this time, where it was they'll never be able to beat Ohio State if they just run the ball. They need to throw it. They need to air it out to keep up. And then Michigan went out and bullied them. And so if I'm Jim Harbaugh, I know how Harbaugh thinks, right? He's going to be like, why should I do anything different? We can do the exact same thing. So that's what they're going to do with Blake Corum at the front end of it. And I have a feeling too, Donovan Edwards going to get unleashed a little bit more in these last few games as well.
So yeah, Justin, we are 3 weeks away from the game, and it doesn't appear as either team has a threat on its schedule. Strange things happen, but there doesn't seem to be a legitimate threat on either team's schedule. And I know that there are real concerns, and there are valid concerns in the Ohio State side about not being able to run the ball. Michigan seems to be, and I know that they got behind Rutgers and it took a while to get going, but they seem to be running on all cylinders. Everything seems to be in tune. Am I missing anything there on the Michigan side?
No, you're not. I do think that Michigan's offense seems to be, even a notch better possibly than they were in week 9 last year. So that's where I think you have to be happy as a Michigan fan. I mean, the other piece to it, you said it too. You watched that Ohio State Northwestern game and you felt like Northwestern honestly was better in the trenches on both sides of the ball. And that's a 1-7 Northwestern team. So that's where I think that as a Michigan fan, you're watching that game saying like, hey, we can do this. We can bully them in the trenches and win games like that. So that's where I think it is, and then of course the weather comes into a factor. Ohio State didn't look like they could do a whole lot with when weather is a factor. So if there's snow on the ground or if it's windy at all in Columbus come November 26th, I think, it's hard to say that the advantage wouldn't be for Michigan in that sense.
Yeah, the Buckeyes very talented in the running back room, but both guys are nicked up and the offensive line is just not moving people out of the way. This is a third consecutive game struggling in the ground game against Iowa, Penn State, and now Northwestern. Justin, one last thing for you. The college football playoff rankings come out Tuesday night. Do you care?
I really don't, because if you win, you're in. I'd love to. I'd love to talk about the scenarios that if an 11-1 Michigan or 11-1 Ohio State, what happens then? There are a lot of scenarios then. But I think ultimately, if you're Michigan, you're looking at it saying, if we win that game, we're in, and let's plan on doing that type of thing. So as much as I think there are some scenarios that Michigan needs to, in some games that Michigan needs to pay attention to, you hope the most high-ranked teams lose. That's, if you're a Michigan fan, you're hoping for that. But ultimately, it's going to come down to that game in Columbus, and I think the winner of that game is probably in. The loser of that game is probably out, and you're sitting on the sideline, unfortunately, watching. So that's where I talked directly to multiple players about this, asking, and they said, yeah, they have it on in the in the common room of Schembechler Hall and stuff, and they notice it, but they're just going to go get to work and play ball. They don't care. It's it's one more thing to me, Mark. It's TV ratings. That was why they ranked Michigan at 5, because they wanted all the Michigan fans to get riled up and talk about it and then watch the next week. So they're very good at the like Real Housewives type drama there over at ESPN.
Well, Michigan and Ohio State fans want a safety net. So there are scenarios in which you could kind of look at 11-1 as being a possibility for the loser of that game if it's a classic. But I know both teams want to, of course, take care of business. And fans of the Big Ten in general want to see both two teams from the conference and get that SEC treatment for the Big Ten. And Illinois fans, I'm not dissing you. I understand that Illinois has got a solid team, and they are going to take on Michigan next week. And of course, Nebraska, we won't even get to them. 29-point underdog looking for a head coach. So that's what it is.
Yeah. I do want to, I mean, can we talk about the SEC and the ESPN? I mean, I understand they work, it's whatever, they're partners, that whole thing, but it's just hilarious how quickly it was like, well, LSU should be in the discussion now. No, they shouldn't. They have 2 losses. They shouldn't be in the discussion, and like there are certain, and then it's like, well, Tennessee, still should be above Michigan because they've got a better win and all this stuff. Well, I'll go ahead. That Penn State win is going to look really good by the end of the year for Michigan. They absolutely dominated that game. And Penn State, if you go and look at their schedule, they're going to end up as that's probably them and Ohio State is going to be their only losses. And that's going to end up as probably a top 10 team. So, I don't know. It just cracks me up how quickly ESPN talking heads are to just bolster any SEC team but downplay every Big Ten team until they fully prove it.
And when you bolster certain teams, that obviously it's the transitive property that works in your favor, because then you stack up a bunch of ranked teams on an SEC schedule.
Exactly. So. Last thing here that I wanted to ask you too, as we were talking about Michigan, Ohio State, and just kind of, how both teams are game planning for that. Right now, if you're Ohio State's defense, what are you doing to stop? Are you just selling out on the run and making JJ throw?
I would shade toward the run, meaning I wouldn't sell out against the run, but I would creep some guys into the box. I would favor stopping the ground game until I got burned. I would have to get burned first to prove that we got to play it straight.
Okay. I agree with that.
On the Ohio State offensive side, what I found interesting was against Northwestern, when they couldn't run the ball, they scored their first touchdown on a Emeka Egbuka end around, kind of an exotic version of an end around play. And I thought, are they going to try to find creative ways to run the ball rather than just traditionally we can't run the ball? And then CJ Stroud has not had a quarterback designed run the entire season. And he had 2 of them that hit big. And one of them, they kept hitting a brick wall on 3rd and 4th and short. And then they pulled it. Nobody's playing that. CJ Stroud runs around the end for like 20 yards. And then they did it later in the game. And I thought, were they saving this for Michigan? And they got into such a tight game that they thought, you know what, we got to make sure we just win this game. Or were they putting this out there for Michigan to have to scheme against and prepare for?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those 2 things. I will say it did feel, watching that game, I wouldn't doubt it if Ryan Day was like, we got to win this game, because for a while there, it was not looking good, and you could just see the frustration on the Ohio State's offense's eyes and their faces, because it didn't seem like anything was working. And I would expect, even with weather, Ohio State's offensive line should be able to shove around Northwestern's defensive line, right? So
there's no excuse on
that's where, like, a lot of people are talking weather. I get it, 100%. That's doing something very big to Ohio State's offense, because they love to throw the ball. But you should still be able to push Northwestern's defense for a yard on 4th and 1. So I think that's going to be the interesting piece too. Is now, how does Michigan's defense play against Ohio State's offense? Are they going to do shade or sell out to stop the passing game, because that their run game isn't going to hurt you quite as bad? I don't know. It's interesting, just because of what we saw last year with Mike McDonald's offense, which is essentially the same as Jesse Minter's offense or defense this year. Sorry, defense. It's that bend but don't break. It's the don't get beat deep by Marvin Harrison Jr. type defense, and try and keep them in front of you. So without I'm not going to say you don't have to worry about Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams. You absolutely do. They're two really, really good running backs. But, maybe they're not at the forefront of your mind right now if you're Jesse Minter.
Justin Rowe, blueby90.com. Get on over there. Check out the Maize and Blue. We appreciate Justin stopping by to talk Michigan football on a regular basis. Justin, have a good week.
Appreciate you, Mark. Thank you.